Let's open a private window. Pornhub.gov. Let's start with hentai. That feels like a good place to start. Alright, so the longest hentai video on Pornhub.gov we're going to start with a video uploaded by Richard Toss called Hentai Sucks and Blows the Big One, which looks like it's 843 minutes long. I'm going to assume it's minutes and not hours. So I think the first thing that I'm drawn to here is that there is a caption on this one, right? And it says, "That was all of it. Please swallow it, miss." I don't know what the last word is because it's cut off by the minute counter. But it's interesting because we have in the actual visual this very clear power dynamic that's being displayed here, where you have like a man and woman, and the woman is obviously in a subservient position, but then in the caption we have this sort of reversal of that, right, where he's like asking her for something and he's saying please. It's a way in which our expectations of the dynamic are challenged by the words associated with it. I also want to point out the name of the piece, which is Hentai Sucks and Blows the Big One, right, which is interesting because like obviously it's a play on words, right? Like hentai sucks, like suck, like sucking a dick, but also it's sort of this like moment of self-critique. This is the longest hentai video on Pornhub. This is the most hentai that there is, and it's saying that hentai sucks, right? It's this moment of self-doubt or self-loathing that's sort of coupled with this reversal of power. So I think there's something here about a need to assert power, conflicting with maybe an internal doubt of that power, and maybe it's about how like the internality of power maybe can conflict with the externality of power. That's my immediate read on this piece. That didn't go terrible. I could have done worse on that. Let's keep going. Fuck, my screenshots folder is just going to be full of screenshots of Pornhub. Alright, so here we have Basara's Bitch Bonanza! ! Love that enthusiasm in the title. Yeah, so again, we're working with these layers, right? We have the man superimposed sort of over the woman whose face we see. We're missing a lot of context in this image, which I think is really interesting. So I'm noticing that in viewing this, my eye line is sort of traced, right? Like you want to start on his eyes because that's naturally where the human eye is drawn to, and then you sort of want to move across the plane in the direction that he's looking, and so your eyes go from him to her. It's interesting to me that she seems to be having a much better time here than he is, right? He's sort of grimacing. He doesn't look like he's enjoying himself, even though, presumably, based on the only information that we have to sort of infer that he is Basara, and he is the one who's having the bitch bonanza. And yet, even though he is the one who's like narratively in control, and he's also like in the front of the screen, like taking up the majority of the frame, right? He's occupying the power space of the frame, with the woman existing sort of on the margins. She's the one who we have to like understand as having a better experience, and she's the one who our eye ends up on, and she's the one who we are like ultimately sort of compelled to I don't want to say identify with, because that's not true, I don't think, but I think we observe her at a distance where we can't identify with her, but maybe we're compelled to confront the idea that she's having a better experience than he is. So I think while initially looking at it, it might look like this is playing into like a lot of misogynist tropes. I think actually we can read this as a critique of those very misogynist tropes that it maybe looks like it's reading into, right? Where it's ultimately failing to make him happy. Do you ever like wonder if your parents know about your YouTube channel? Let's do parody. That's probably a gold mine, I assume. Most viewed of all time. Well, these are a little disappointing, to be honest. Sounds pretty good. Arkham Asylum in parentheses, white male. And there's a lot to unpack there, isn't there? So obviously we have this image of Harley Quinn. Is she straddling someone? It's not necessarily 100% clear to me from this image whether she's meant to be straddling someone or not. The image is almost exactly symmetrical, right? Split down the middle, with the one distinction sort of being Harley's color scheme. So there's like several things going on. I think one layer that's immediately obvious, right, is that they're introducing this sort of pop culture character of Harley Quinn, right? Who is like a mythological figure in a lot of ways. She represents danger, but also sort of sexuality. She is also a character who was originally conceived with a very specific demographic in mind, right? As we see in parentheses, white male. Harley is a character who exists in the first place to cater to that demographic. But, of course, in recent years, we've sort of seen a reversal on that in terms of like Birds of Prey and other recent properties which have tried to put a more feminist spin on Harley. When was this video published? So this is pre-Birds of Prey. But definitely post the like Harley Quinn feminist revival era. It's interesting that she's in a prison, sort of being rhetorically cast as an imprisoned figure within the like white male context that she exists in. And we have this sort of false symmetry, which kind of suggests an interiority that is not externalized. So I think this is like a really sad piece, right? This is a piece about like a person with an interiority which doesn't get to be expressed because she's imprisoned within a social context. And so it's about oppression in that way. All right, give me those trans videos. Okay, so sex all day outdoor plus home fuck. I think one thing that stands out to me immediately is that the way that they're referring to the sex outdoors and the way they're referring to sex at home is different, right? You have sex all day outdoor plus home fuck, and fuck is like it's like very different connotations, right? And this this leads me to feel like maybe there are like more negative connotations with being home. And I don't know, I think it's interesting looking at the background of this image, how we have on the left this darker space and on the right this like brighter, more identifiably outdoors space. And the space on the left sort of has these leaves, so it is identifiably outdoors still, but it's a little darker, it's a little more ambiguous. Whereas the outdoor section on the right side is really bright, it's inviting, it makes, you know, sex all day outdoor sound like a good time, to contrast with home fuck, which I, by the title, am reading to be maybe a more sinister space. I don't want to ignore the two subjects of the piece, but I do think they're both sort of aligned with these two distinct halves of the image, where you have the one on the right is clearly a little bit more sexualized by the image than the one on the left. You know, finger in their mouth, midriff showing, etc. And so that's like another space to add like sexuality to this like positively connotated green space, as opposed to this darker space on the left, in which, you know, that subject is also sort of more enshadowed. And also, like, let's not discount that that this is in the transgender porn section, right? And we can assume that there's like some element of transness being brought to this piece. So it does feel like a piece about transition to me in various ways, right? We have the gradual transition of the image from dark to bright. We have the transition from outdoors to indoors. We have a transition from this interestingly positively denotative space to negatively denotated space. And also we have like transition in terms of that we presumably have a trans subject in at least one of these two subjects. So it's interesting that the piece can go reading left to right from a bad space to a good space, while the title can go from a good space to a bad space. And so I just think it's an interesting work about how these kinds of transitions can both improve and disimprove things at the same time. And how these two things can coincide. That's what this piece is about to me. Let's do some keyword searches. Gamer. All right, gamer girl forgets to turn off the stream and squirt in live chat. Do you know what the first thing I notice about this image is? The first thing I notice is that her eyes are cut off, which is like often a sign of like depersonalization in image, right? She also is framed by this Twitch stream, and she's like posed in this way that actually looks very intentional. It doesn't look like an accidental thing. It looks like it's on purpose. But she's framed, she's like existing within this image of this like digital media sharing platform, and that is the thing that's cutting off her eyes, right? That is the thing that's doing the depersonalization within the frame. So this like my first instinct looking at this is to say, oh, this is about how social media is like ruining the youths. But that's just a first instinct. Let's take a second. Let's dig a little bit deeper. Let's see if we see anything else. You know, it's interesting that she's like being depersonalized by the stream, but she also has on her monitor another video open, and I can't tell what platform this video is being hosted on. But the fact of that sort of harkens me back to the context that we're seeing this in, which is on a video streaming platform, right? So it has this recursive element to it. And so as soon as we bring that recursivity into the read, me looking at this image, I feel myself being like interpolated into the role of the Twitch chat, right? I am a viewer of this stream. We are viewing this stream looking at the image. So now that we've taken that step, now I'm thinking about how, like, by viewing these videos, am I like then performing the act of depersonalization inherently? And the answer is always like yes, a little bit, right? When you view a video producer who you like, who you don't personally know, you're always like depersonalizing them a little bit. So it's sort of about parasocial relationships. I don't think this is about how technology is bad broadly. I think this is about a very specific dynamic of fans to creators. It's interesting though, she's being depersonalized, but she's not necessarily being disempowered. And that these are separate processes. And one doesn't necessarily imply the other. Like, she has all the control in the situation, basically, you know, based on the context that we have here. I know that feels like it contradicts the title a little bit, but the title feels very tongue-in-cheek to me. I don't think we're meant to take it literally. I think, like, especially with the capitalization at the end there. Yeah, so I think this is about how, even if we don't disempower them, even if power dynamics still exist in their favor, it is still possible to depersonalize someone. And I don't think it necessarily is taking a moral stance on that one way or another, but it's pointing out the distinction between these two processes, and also about the ways in which we, the audience of this piece, are contributing to that piece itself. And now I've roped you into it. Sorry about that. I want to pause for a second on fucked a cute gamer stepsister. I'm not going to stop and do a full reading of this piece. I just want to point out that I think it's really funny that it's not like fucked my cute gamer stepsister. It's just a cute gamer stepsister. Like, she's just someone's stepsister. Do you think this video is going to get demonetized? Oh, what are some fucking keywords that I can put in here? 1,136 results for Sonic the Hedgehog. I wonder what happens if I put my name in. What happens? I guess I get some porn results. I'm not really sure what I was expecting. Similarly, I'm not going to do a full analysis on this one, but I just want to point out two things about Garfield Eats Big Bird Ass. One is that it's uploaded by a user named Garfield Big Bird, who is doing exactly what they set out to do, and the other is that it has an approval rating of 94%. Alright, so this one is called Ophelia Shakespeare Fuck Pig Bukkake, full version available on. And I think the first interesting thing here immediately is the way that it's recontextualizing your understanding of Shakespeare, right? Ophelia is a Shakespeare character, right? Ophelia, that's a Shakespeare character? Yeah, that's a character in Hamlet. I'm doing a lot of preemptive research for this one. I don't fucking remember what happens in Hamlet. Ophelia is a character who participates in this revenge plot and, like, eventually descends into madness, right? But she's also a character who a lot of feminist critics have tried to rehabilitate in recent years. So obviously this is this is a context we're meant to be reading this in, and so I think it's interesting that here we have someone wearing a pig snout nose who's being like visually degraded on camera, which immediately to me lends itself to a feminist reading about women being ridiculed and devalued in all depictions of them, and in particular a critique of Shakespeare for misunderstanding or misrepresenting Ophelia in his work and not giving her the agency of a human being, but turning her into some kind of animal. Because pig nose. It's ironic. It's satire. I'm not 100% sure it works for me because it does feel a little bit like A, white feministy, but also B, maybe not necessarily succeeding at satire, and maybe it ends up just recreating the thing that it's meant to be critiquing. All right, let's do one more. This one's called Girl Swims in Winter Jacket, White Blouse, Jeans. Well, this is obviously like a very freeing piece, right? She's swimming, which is like often used as a symbol of freedom in many cases, especially when it's like depicted in the place of safety like it is right now. But she's also doing it in clothes that you're like not supposed to swim in, right? In these clothes where swimming in them is shedding a norm in some way, right? Maybe it's not like literal nakedness that's happening here, but in some ways it's spiritual nakedness or it's social nakedness, the shedding of inhibitions. We see her emerging here, and I think the act of emergence is a really powerful one. There's a building back there. We're reminded of society. We're reminded of the world that she exists in, the world she's going to return to. We have this effect where the top of the frame is very bright, and we have this stripe of brightness across the middle, but then we also have the stripes of darkness in the green and in the water below. So we have this sort of horizontal effect, which is split up by her herself, who is sort of this bright streak cutting through the trees. You know, she's disrupting the composition of the space around her. This is a piece about freedom to me, about movement. All right, I've been doing this for almost an hour, which means there's probably at least 10 minutes of usable footage on here. This was dumb. Make sure to like, share, subscribe.